It's Wingin' It Wednesday, driven by Service Chevrolet Cadillac.
.06 now, News Talk 96.5. KPEL, welcome into Wingin' It Wednesday. Our panelists, Warren Cottle and Stafford Barnett, are here. Looks like you guys both survived Christmas all right.
We did. I did.
I mean,
I wouldn't say all right, but I survived.
You survived.
Is Christmas over?
What about you?
Are you still playing Christmas music?
That's not Christmas music. No, Christmas music is done.
I mean, at the Kirkpatrick house.
No, we're done with that.
Oh,
we have tickets for Jack Johnson in February, and so we have moved over. We are now listening to Jack Johnson in the house.
Good.
And and the kids are not happy about it. They're really not happy.
Well, he has that whole Curious George album.
They like him for that. Yeah. But anyway, I've had enough. Like I didn't even plug in the Christmas tree last night.
So post Halloween to December 25th is enough for you.
That's enough. Okay. Just there. Like it ends when it's done. Anyway, all right. So we are staring another year in the face, and President Trump says he's back at work. The White House signaling that entitlement reform will be the first 2018 agenda item, and they at least believe they're going to actually have some Democrat support on some of these changes. Stafford, we're going to start with you on this. Where do you even start? I think there are a lot of programs on both sides that people think are wasteful, or maybe we don't know what they do, or is it still serving the original purpose? What are your thoughts?
So I've listened to a couple of different things on that this morning and in a couple of days about some of the mistakes that they felt were made by the administration early off in the beginning, and that if Trump would have led the year with an infrastructure bill instead of going directly after Obamacare and tax breaks, that he could have gotten some bipartisan support on something and then taken that win into other things. I think the problem they have now with entitlement reform is that there were so many promises made to not touch Medicare or Medicaid, and it looks like there's potential for those promises to be broken. And as somebody who's paid into Medicare and Medicaid his whole life and been frustrated with the fact that I can pay into a 401k and see my balance grow, but when I pay into Medicare and Medicaid, I don't see my balance grow. It's supposed to be there for me, right? It's supposed to be there for anybody who's paid into it. You just kind of sit there and shake your head and go, okay, am I going to be on the cusp of people that lose access to this? And there's a big philosophical debate with that as well, right? So the 30-year-olds and the 18 to 30-year-olds didn't put people in place that got us into this situation financially, right? But they did reap the rewards of their parents' decisions and their decisions with elected officials to have access to Medicare, Medicaid, and a couple other social programs, which they're going to continue to have, while with the younger generation who arguably didn't put us into this financial bind that we're in through elections, may lose access to some of this stuff. So if they go after Medicare and Medicaid, it's just they're going to continue to lose that middle-of-the-road conservative or that person who, votes with their conscience for midterms, and I think that's what's going to happen.
Warren, what are your thoughts? Where do you start with these entitlement programs?
Well, that's a perfectly good question. Where do you start? And God only knows. I mean, the thing about it is they have gotten so out of kilter, and it's like when you talk about entitlement programs, I mean, all throughout government, there's so much abuse of funds. It's just ungodly that as far as the entitlement, like Social Security and all of that stuff, that the problem was that when it came into being, the people who were drawing the money never paid into it. My father was a perfect example of it, that whenever he retired in 1961, he probably drew out more in the first 3 months than he ever paid into it, because back then they paid in something like 1% of their earnings, which was might as well say 2% because it was matched by their employer or whatever, and he paid in the maximum, which I think at that time wasn't much, but still, whenever he retired, I mean, he lived to be 91 years old, and so that you go in a Social Security office, I defy anybody, go in a Social Security office there and look around and see how many old people you see in there. There are none. There are very few. Most of them in there are the ones that Stafford's talking about. They're the young people. They're in there at 20s, 30 years old. They're in there drawing disability. And that one of the things that people tell me, I think the facts bear it out, that welfare rolls are down. The payments for child support and all that, that those things are down, which I've been told that the problem is that when you go there to sign up for that, you have to name the father. And then the state goes after that man to get him to legally pay, or they can go to jail. And so they don't name the father, and they don't even go sign up for it anymore. What they do, they sign up for disability. And so I don't have any idea what those figures are, but I know it's enormous at the number of people that are drawing disability. And they can be illegal aliens, they can be legal people. Most of them, I think, are citizens. But they can be illegal as long as they got a Social Security number. Like one friend of mine said, it may not be theirs, but they got the number. But I understand that the average check for drawing a kid's crazy check is what they call them in school. It's like $730 a month. So there's some families out there who tell their kids to go to school, to act crazy, to be disruptive, and the more they do that, then they get special. They're called then special needs. So then they get disability, and those kind of things. There's some of those people out there got 5, 6, 7 kids that are drawing disability checks on them for emotional trauma or whatever. And I'm sure some of them are right, but all of this stuff, when you keep adding it up, it's just like a tsunami. It just keeps building, and it just keeps building, and it just keeps building. And somewhere along the way, somebody's got to have the courage to stand up and say, stop.
Is it changing too fast? We talked yesterday to a financial advisor who was telling us about the change with like the 529 plan, which forever had just been for higher education. You could draw it, and now the change has been made so where you could use it for K-12 expenses. As someone, you talk about the younger people, and this isn't necessarily an entitlement, but kind of along the same lines. I'm almost afraid to take advantage of this new thing because things are changing so fast. It used to be relatively linear. Now is, when we elect a Democratic president again, that stuff going to go away. How does that work in your mind, Stafford?
I mean, look, the 529 plan changing to allow for use in public and private school, I think is a positive in some situations for communities where the public education system is failing, which at one point that was our community, right? I think we've kind of rounded the corner there, and public schools are in better shape than they have been in a long time. And there's arguments to be made about, you were able to put money away on your card for medical expenses, right? And now some of those cards are are recognized at daycares where you can pay for a daycare's pre-tax. I can tell you that as somebody who pays for daycare and pays for medical bills with kids, that kind of stuff saves me a lot of money, and I'm thankful for it, right? And personally, I would rather see us invest in a healthier public education system than continue to give money to the private school system that's already flush with cash.
Warren, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think what it all comes down to is just complete micro or nano management of the government, and that, there's very few things they get into and try to manage that they don't screw it up. And that education is a perfect prime example of it. And about the only real power that Congress has left is manipulating the tax code. And that is why we need to just totally scrap the whole damn thing and go to some kind of alternative, which I favor, the fair tax or the VAT tax, the national retail sales tax, whatever you want to call it, where you just get rid of all of that kind of such stuff, and that it'll bring more money into the nation, into the coffers. And so that it's just a mess, and somebody's got to have the courage to at least start on it.
All right, let's go to the phones at 232-1542. Good morning. Welcome into Acadiana's Morning News and Wingin' It Wednesday. Go ahead with your comments.
Good morning. I have two questions. So Stafford says that if you have a moral conscience, you'll vote one way. So if you don't vote that way,
I've never said that. I have never once said that.
We talk about our topic.
And then he did. That is his topic. He said a few minutes ago. And then what else I'd like to know is how is it my responsibility to raise everybody else's kids? And I'll hang up and listen.
Nobody's dropping their kids off at your house for daycare, bro. Like, I don't understand where you jump these conclusions from. Look, you called from driving on a road that was paid for with everybody's tax money. Where is it my obligation to pay for your roads, right? So throw that BS argument out the window and let's move forward. I never said that anybody has a moral obligation to vote a certain way. There are more arguments to vote for both parties, period. And I think what people have failed to grasp here is that I don't vote down party lines on either side on anything. So I appreciate it. I think you've taken what I've said the wrong way.
All right, we're going to move on. Trump's first year in office. We're going to talk about highs, lows, and what our panelists look forward to in 2018. Stay with us on Wingin' It Wednesday.
It's Wingin' It Wednesday, driven by Service Chevrolet Cadillac.
Anytime I need to see a face, I just close my eyes and I am taken to a place where your crystal mind, a magenta feeling, take a shelter in the face of my spine, straight like a chicken cherry cola.
7:19, Wingin' It Wednesday, brought to you by Service Cadillac, where it is Wash It Up Wednesday. Look, I know it looks nasty outside right now, but the one thing that will always get me in a better mood is a clean car. I like freshly vacuumed mats. That's just it. Just makes me happy. You know, it's like a clean house.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway, Wash It Up Wednesday over at the Wash.
I've got to be able to get to my mats to be able to vacuum them. That's my biggest problem.
I know it's an ongoing debate in the lives of us parents.
I have a 3-inch threshold between the back seat and the mats of granola bar wrappers for my kids.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Mine are melted crayons in the door handle.
Oh.
Yeah, those are my favorite.
That's when you know you're in South Louisiana.
Well, mine is just trash from me.
All right, we're nearing the end of Trump's first year in office. Obviously, the election is more than a year past, and things were already kind of in motion. Warren, let's talk about the highs, the lows, what you look forward to in 2018. You want to talk about a high?
Well, they did make it legal in Colorado and a lot of places, but I don't partake in those things.
That's coming up next.
That kind of high, okay.
Well, I thought that's what you were talking about. Rocky Mountain High. I think that 2018, I think has a lot of promise. That if you look at where we were in 2017, that we went into the doldrums. Back in the, I don't know, we go through these cycles, but 2008, 2009 really was the bottom of so many bad things that just came together at one time, and so trickling down and it kind of started on a gradual path going up, but it was gradual. I think that there's a lot more hope out there, especially in the financial community and just generally in the business community and also just with the people in general, that things are going to improve in 2018. I think you've already seen a lot of it in 2017. You've seen a lot of companies that are now coming back towards this country, rebuilding plants, bringing jobs back. The stock market is, of course, it's at an all-time high. It's going up, had 3 records or something, or 5 this year, which the stock market is a futures economic indicator. It's what people think they have hope in what's going to happen. It's why they invest money. It's been said that the market is a place where people meet to agree on price but disagree on value. And the people who are buying, they are buying it because they see a greater value going forward than the people selling. People selling said, I've had this as long as I want, I got to where I want, I don't want more of it, or maybe I've lost all I can stand to lose. Yeah. So, I just think that 2018 is going to be a good year. I really do.
Do you see all these records, they were great when they happened, setting us up for a bubble in 2018?
Not in 2018, no. And it depends on, a bubble generally is when it's based on nothing, and that if you go back to the bubble, the .com bubble, where you had money that was just poured into the market, and there were companies out there that didn't even make anything. They were just shells. They had been put together, and they were raising money because they were going to, be able to discover oil or uranium on the moon and all kind of such stuff with that, and they never did anything. And so all at once, one day, they were worth $14 billion or whatever, and that people were selling companies that they had started for tens of millions of dollars, getting stock. And then all at once, that $10 million worth of stock was worth $10,000. And so that was a bubble. The housing market bubble was because that so much of that stuff was fraudulent, and it came crashing down. But if you're talking about if economy has actually got a solid foundation, which is I think is kind of what we have now, I wouldn't say it was a bubble.
Stafford, your thoughts?
I think the highs for 2017 were the economy. I think that it's continued growth over the past. I mean, it's been, like Warren said, since we hit the lows in 2009. So we've had 8 years of healthy growth in the private and public sector when it comes to the markets. If you go to the rest of the country, you see a significantly lower unemployment rate than what we see here. It's kind of tough for us to recognize how healthy the economy is when we live in one of the worst economies in the United States right now.
By some accounts, the worst.
Yeah, potentially. And so, my hope is that we see some increase in oil prices in 2018 and that it does something good for our local economy. I can tell you for 2018 or for 2017, one of the lows that for me personally was politics in general. You see people just say whatever it takes to get elected. You see a lot of dirty stuff thrown out. And look, sometimes some of that dirty stuff may be true, but if you can't, if journalists can't go out and prove it, then it shouldn't be a matter of public record, right? But Trump going out and saying Barack Obama plays golf all the time. Trump's taken 80 vacation days this year and arguably has played more golf than any president in history. And a third of his time has been spent in his own properties. And the big question that's been asked is, what's the precedent for the executive spending, federal money on his own enterprises? And everybody just kind of scratches their head like, no, we've never had a president who's owned, multiple luxury properties for them to vacation at. So,
do you see a change though? Because The Rock was one of these celebrities that kind of threw their name out there. If people see that someone like a Trump can be elected, if you would ask me 5 years ago, I would have said no. People wouldn't go there because there's no experience there. But if it turns into American Idol, aka a popularity contest, and people just want to see what would happen.
I mean, we're there, right? I don't know that. So he got elected. I mean, Higgins got elected. Higgins was famous for doing videos, and then the guy turns around and films a campaign commercial at a concentration camp, right? Like this is the year. Again, I think I've said it. The race that Higgins won, there were some very qualified conservatives in that race, good men, West Point graduates, Naval Academy graduates. Arguably, there were some guys who may have been in politics too long, right? And we've kind of worshipped this outsider perspective. And I think it's because we've done a bad job in the public education system of teaching civics, where you need to realize that the ball in Washington, D.C. moves extremely slow unless there are some very, very greasy, loud wheels, right? So people got fed up and got frustrated, and that's how we ended up with. And then Democrats rigged their side for one person who they thought deserved a shot at it, right? And they're suffering the consequences.
And the Bernie people are still mad.
Warren,
you want to wrap this one up for us?
Yeah, that Stafford brings a good perspective to this, but the one problem I have is that his perspective is short in duration historically, and that's because of, as Ronald Reagan said about Walter Mondale, his youth and inexperience. But that, those things have been going on for decades and decades and talking about the nasty campaigns and all that. I said this back when they had the Neil Reiser campaign for Congress in North Louisiana, that was kind of the epitome of the insiders trying to rig the system to get their boy in there. And the things that came out in there were just totally nasty. And the other guy won, who was never supposed to win. And that I said, I hope that spells a beginning to the end of these negative campaigns of destroy your competition any way you can. And I think to a certain extent that has been happening. And I want to say this, that the whole media is always trashing social media, and a lot of that you can thank social media for it, because everybody out there now has a voice. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, they still have a voice. And there's a lot of things out there that they bring up that the mainstream media, whatever you want to call them, will not touch. And all at once somebody starts looking into it, which is what I've done on several occasions. When I heard somebody say something, I said, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That's nothing but a bunch of lies. I can't believe any of that. And what do? You go on the internet and you start searching, you start looking, you say, by God, I guess most of that was right. And that I think that social media and such stuff and communications today, the tweeters and all of that, is a major plus.
So I want to address something that you said, Warren, because it's an important perspective. Yes, I'm younger than you.
Yes.
But I represent a voting bloc that, and I'm not saying I stand for any person in that. I just stand for myself, right? That is going to be having to pick up the pieces of the damage done by the older generations in the United States to our deficit and to our economy and to our education system. So while I appreciate that there may be a little bit more historical perspective, right, from some of our older voters, at some point you're going to stop paying taxes, and that point is a lot longer for me. So the $1.5 trillion that just got added to the deficit, right? I got to foot that bill, not you.
The problem with what you just said, I mean, look, I agree with everything you're saying,
right?
But the problem with that is the exact same thing that my group was saying when we were 18, 19, 20 years old.
Post Bill Clinton, when there was a surplus?
Do what now?
Post Bill Clinton, when there was a surplus?
I'm talking about back when
we've had this problem solved before,
look,
and we've continued to cut and spend.
May I talk? Okay. You go back to the 1960s and such stuff, when there was the Vietnam War raging, there was all these problems. My generation was saying we didn't cause these things. Yeah. We're not in charge. And so then the budget started when they went in and passed that tax where the budget would go up exponentially every year unless Congress trimmed it, that's when you started seeing the thing double every 8 to 9 years. And that was in 1968 or something like that. So regardless of who was in charge, it's double. The only time it didn't was when Republicans took over Congress and you had a quasi, and my friends hate to hear me say this, but you had a quasi-Republican president named Bill Clinton, and that we had a surplus for the first time since the 1960s when Johnson put the 10% surcharge on taxes to pay for the Vietnam War. And so, that it is an ongoing thing. The younger people always feel like they're getting shafted by it, and that...
but look, from our perspective, I can't, again, from my perspective, I shouldn't say our, it's really frustrating when we recognize, both you and I just recognized that when partisanship was dropped and people worked together, good things were done.
When was that?
When we had a Republican Congress and a Democrat in the White House, right? When they were forced to work together. I think when you drop the extremists from the parties, right, and we start going for this 60-40 vote as opposed to this 51-49, things tend to work a lot
you're
better.
Just talking about, though, very recently. If you go back the last 100 years or whatever, most of the time you had a Democrat in the White House and you had a huge majority of Democrats in the Senate and in the House. They're the ones that passed all of that stuff that put us where we are today.
But to blatantly say they, as in Democrats, are the ones that got us.
Well, that's what you're saying. No. The extremists on both sides, are fighting over this and nothing's getting done. The extremists on the Republicans
and the extremists on the Democrat side. There's both, right?
Well, what I'm saying,
there's Sheila Jackson Lee's and there's...
Well, at least you got somebody fighting against it. What I'm saying, for 70 years, you had the extremists on one side with no opposition.
Well, we need to leave it there, guys. We're going to move on. It's 7:33 here. We're going to talk about oil prices hitting a 2.5-year high. What does that mean for the economic drivers here in our area? And do our panelists see it as a sign? some jobs will come back to our area. That next.
It's Wingin' It Wednesday, driven by Service Chevrolet Cadillac.
Seems like the rain has come to an end just a bit, but it's cold. The wind chill's not going to get out of the 30s today. Right now it's 43 degrees here at News Talk 96.5 KPEL, and we are right smack in the middle of Winging It Wednesday. I want to talk about oil prices hitting some new highs, but will we see it in our area? Stafford, you want to kick this one off? Is it good news, just so-so news, or where are you on this?
I think it's already. I think we're at the good news stage. What I've personally experienced is that I think that if your business had any weakness, any flaws, wasn't diversified enough, that business has probably gone by now, or it's been, depending on your perspective, downsized or right-sized, right? Depending on whether you're the owner or whether you're trying to explain to your employee why you're laying them off. But we still have a problem here with whether or not the Gulf is ever going to come back deep water the way that it was. And, I've talked to a couple of different people about it, people who have a lot of respect for him. My brother's one of them. He believes that deep water will come back. My personal perspective is I just don't know that it'll ever come back the way that it did. Lafayette and Houston's economies are heavily tied to that Gulf of Mexico, deep water anywhere in the world type business, because that's what we've really innovated at. And while Houston has a lot more land drilling stuff, the percentage of our business, oil and gas wise, that's land drilling, is very low. So I can tell you that I've seen some places begin to start hiring again. I don't think they're hiring at the pay that they were doing. I know that there are a lot of service contractors who are probably very anxious to go back and renegotiate their day rates with the people who, beat them down for years. There are big companies still getting swallowed up by even bigger companies. We just saw Stone Energy get purchased the other day, which was, I think, a good thing for them. And hats off to these guys who still have the cash on hand to go out and buy people. I think Insco, if I'm not mistaken, turned around and bought another large drilling contractor the other day. So we're seeing a lot of companies coming together and buying other companies, and the companies who are smart enough with cash on hand. And the irony about that is that the companies that were doing that were the companies that when things were going absolutely haywire and you could throw money into the wind and come back with a return on investment that was great for shareholders, not make some of the risky decisions that some of these other companies made. And because they kept that business philosophy and stuck to that plan, when the market went to crap, they're able to buy other companies. I've had people that I've respected a lot tell me you can be a great manager in a uphill economy because that's easy work. If you want to be a great manager, show me how you manage the down economy. So I think we'll see some jobs come back. I'm already seeing on the personal side some work being done in the Gulf of Mexico. Some of the I&E contractors are doing pretty well. Still nothing like they were, but if we can just keep going in the right direction, hopefully some of this will break off soon.
Seems like what Stafford's saying, it's more of a long game thing than a short game. Stafford, Warren, what are your thoughts?
It's always a long game thing. That the oil and energy business is cyclical, always has been, probably always will be. That my philosophy is that the good times are like a roller coaster. Is that it's a long, gradual ride up. That old car is clink, 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 clinking on, and so. You really don't realize that you're in a real good upturn until you look back and say, about the last 5, 6, 7 months have been really good. And then, as Stafford says, when it starts getting a little bit better and a little bit better, that and it gets to the top when things just really go haywire. And this is my philosophy, and it's mostly geared to the institutional investors, the investment banking firms on Wall Street, the people who handle all the big money, is that when it gets to where it is so high that it can't possibly get any hotter, it can't possibly go up anymore. They're out there trying to loan money to everybody in the world. They're out there telling you, you need to buy another company, you need to buy this, you need to buy that. And that the next thing you know, when that roller coaster gets to the top, It's not a gradual ride down. It happens in a matter of sometimes hours, but it's usually like in a few days or a few weeks. Back in whenever it was, back about 2001, I think, something around there, they laid off 90-something work boats in one afternoon in the Gulf of Mexico. And that was between all these different companies, and that what happens is it's one of those herd mentality things. One company does something, and the rest of them, they're analysts and all that, say, we got to do that, So if Company A over here has a big layoff of people, their stock ticks up, a quarter or something, because people see that as that we're getting rid of expenses, profits are going up, so then everybody else says, we got to do the same, And so it's... I think, but it's still it's fundamentally driven by the basics, supply and demand. And if the economy grows, the demand is going to be there. Is Deepwater going to come back? I read an article the other day, and I swear to God, this was the title of the article, and it says, "Is there a future, or does Deepwater drilling have a future?" And I said, if somebody had written that article 5 years ago,
we laughed at him.
No, laughed at him. It probably had him try to have him committed or whatever. It's like when I think her name was McLean. I think she wrote the article in Fortune magazine in 2011 in March, and the title of her article was "Is Enron Overpriced?"
Wow.
And
Enron still exists.
And that. Do what?
EOG Resources, Enron Oil and Gas.
Well, it's not the Enron. It's not the Enron company that it was.
No.
Somebody just took the name anyway. That that the fact is that what's going to happen? It's going to come back, and that if the economy comes back, if there's a demand for it, that will come back.
All right, we're going to take a phone call, Stafford, real quick. If you want to wrap this up, then we'll go to the call.
Yeah. So you're right. It's about supply and demand. Yeah, I remember the domestic oil production increased under the previous administration higher than it has ever, with the exception of when we started kicking this stuff off. And that's really what drove our prices down, was we increased our output so much. And then when we had the smallest hit to demand, when those stockpiles started going up, that's when we saw oil go from 130 to 38.
But it was also your demand was caused of the worldwide down economy.
Right.
All right, let's go to the phones at 232-1542. Good morning. You're on Wingin' It Wednesday with Warren and Stafford. Go ahead with your comments.
Hey, guys. Appreciate everything that you have to say. Well-informed, as usual. But you guys are forgetting a couple of things on this topic.
Go ahead, yeah.
The biggest thing that killed South Louisiana in the oil field is the good old boy network. It's ignorance, it's narcissism, and it's greed that took over the majority of these smaller companies. And that's why they're being swallowed up by the larger companies. The larger companies are understanding now that they can operate on skeleton crews, which they should have been doing a long time ago. But now they're lower budget and they're trying to hang on for the long haul, like Stafford said, so they have to hold that capital and invest in what they have right now, and they're learning that they can fully operate on the smaller crews without blowing all the money that they used to. And the smaller companies that went out of business, it was because of narcissism and greed.
All right, thanks for your call.
I think that's a really interesting point. I from my perspective with that, I would actually like to sit down with that guy and talk more about it. Is when you were getting a positive return on investment, even though you may have been making some risky decisions, it's real hard for somebody to see that 5 years from now or 3 years from now that investment's not going to pay out.
But think about it. It's almost like every other business. When you realize, it's when hospitals have layoffs. It's when anyone, then you realize what you can do if you push your people. Now, is it good for the employee? Of course not. But is it good for the overall business that you're not paying an extra benefits and salary? Salary sometimes is the smallest portion. Warren, quick point. We'll go back to the phones one more time.
Yeah, what the guy says about the greed, the narcissism, and all of that. I pretty much disagree with a lot of that stuff. Is what has happened in the oil and gas industry over the last 50 years has been that it has been transformed from a mechanical industry to a high tech industry, and that they're worlds apart. And all at once that you started going out there, and instead of having to do things that took you a month to get it done, you're now able to do it sometime in a matter of hours or a matter of a couple of days or whatever. And I think that's where the real problem came in, and that as far as the guys out there that had the little companies and all that, and some of them were big companies that did not adapt to the changing times. Is that and look, and timing is everything. Back in the early 80s, when they came out and said everything has got to go to digital electronics. Well, digital electronics was extremely expensive. And you go in there and you try to convert everything over to that, and, you're talking millions of dollars, not a couple of hundred here and there. Yeah. And all at once they said, if you don't have that, then don't even bid on this job. So you had all these companies out there who were remortgaging the farm, so to speak, to buy everything that they needed and blah, blah, blah. And as soon as they got it, November 1981, contracts started being canceled. And they said, okay, game's over. And you had a lot of these companies out there who had just reinvested everything, and then all at once they were going under.
All right, let's wrap this one up with one more phone call at 232-1542. Good morning, you're on with Wingin' It Wednesday. Go ahead with your comment.
How you doing?
Good, thanks. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm 67 years old.
Well, you're a youngster.
Oh, yes, and I'm looking at if the oil field gets back into full swing, they're going to need a lot of qualified workers to handle the equipment and be qualified for it without any delays or interference.
Okay.
Yeah. So what he's referring to
Thank you for your call, by the way.
is the great crew change, right? Which is the idea that the older guy, when pushed out of the oil and gas business, if they can find a more stable means to take care of their family, they're less likely to come back to the oil and gas business. And it's a big problem. And,
well, yeah, because you kind of feel burned.
Right.
I mean, by the whole thing. If you find something else that you can maintain gainful employment, real quick.
I was in a deepwater drilling company's office in Houston, Texas last summer, talking about that very thing. It's gone every time there's one of these cycles. It's the same thing. And this guy said, the problem is, he said, we have laid off so many people, good people and all that. And he said, when this thing starts coming back, they're not coming back at $750 and $1,000 a day. They're coming back at $3,000, $3,500 a day. He said, so we got to pay for our own mistakes.
7:48 now at News Talk 96.5. Cape Help. Welcome back to Acadiana's Morning News at 7:51. Stafford, you reminded me of something on the calendar, and I had not scrolled down far enough in my calendar.
Can I say it, please?
You can say it.
It's Brian Pope Day.
It's Brian Pope in court day.
Brian, I hope that by this afternoon, Brian Pope's in jail.
What do you think? What do you think is going to happen? I mean, do you think that's a real possibility?
I think it's a real possibility. Look, you got to sit back and go, his social media presence, his inability to go out and do any of the community service he was originally required to do, so they changed it to trash pickup, and he's only done a couple hours of that. I mean, this guy, if he gets off, there's going to be like 30 defendants behind him in line going like, what's the difference between me and him?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Good point.
So Judge Edwards has his hands full today, and man, I hope he goes to Gen Pop at like 3:00 this afternoon, man. Yeah, that BS that he pulled on the person running the campaign was just the dirtiest of the dirty. And,
to me, that's something you do after you're acquitted.
Right. Well,
like after everything's done with and you're,
you call the guy and go, hey, I'd like to make amends. You have a warrant, right? I want to be a better person, right? Well, you don't have him arrested for a 20-year-old, a veteran, an Army veteran, right? 20-year-old bad checks. Guy doesn't remember doing it. The guy has since fought for his country and come back, and Brian Pope goes.
That was 2 decades ago. Apparently, there were 4 different checks, and just to give some background on what Stafford's saying, there were 4 different checks that this guy, an Army veteran, had tried cashing or giving to businesses in 1997.
Right.
All of them didn't total more than $200.
Right.
Right. So we're not talking about a $10,000 hot check.
No, not at all. And I can almost understand if that would be the case, if it was thousands of dollars in bad checks. But
somebody who's given back to society.
Right, absolutely.
Hey, Warren, are we going to be talking about our first Wingin' It Wednesday of the new year? Brian Pope is out and headed for retirement.
I really
He's
don't
on your committee.
Huh?
He's on your committee, the Republican Parish Executive Committee. You all still haven't written a letter to the newspaper asking him to resign.
He is. And
And we already know what the rules are for kicking him off, but I'm telling you, you'll need to ask him to resign publicly.
Well, you just got through saying you don't participate with the Republican Party, any of those parties.
Any parties.
All right. So, I don't know that I will say this, that some of the things that he has done are, kind of really, really, really crossed the rail of sanity. And that you just, you don't, if you're in law enforcement, the last thing you want to do is to tell a judge that, I don't pay any attention to what you say. When the judge tells you this is what you're going to do, this is what you're not going to do, and you walk out of the court and say, I'll do what I want to do, that's just not smart. And regardless of anything else, and that's kind of where all of this has come down from, is that basically Judge Edwards has sat there and laid the rules down, and this is what's going to happen, and he just simply says, so what?
Yeah, Stafford made mention about the community service, and he hasn't done much as far as a trash pickup.
Yeah, but now look.
But there was also some classes he was supposed to teach about public information requests and FOIA requests, nonetheless. That he just kind of threw out the window.
Right, but now hold on.
Had to face Judge Edwards again.
Lock him up.
Hold on. Now you're talking about the community service and whether or not they do it. Most anybody who has any kind of connections or whatever never do any of that community service.
Sure.
They get somebody to sign off that they did it all. I mean, I don't know for
you. Are you saying that you know people who are committing fraud on their public service hours? Because if you do, you should call the DA.
No, not my job. I called DA. They hung up on me.
Warren, you have a voice.
Twice. Y'all hear that out there? The DA hung up on me twice.
Who's this crotchety old man calling here?
Yeah.
Talking about uranium.
And it was about a legitimate deal, and they hung up on me. But I don't know. Now.
All right. Well, we will continue to follow that story. Derek will be on it. Brandon will be in a little bit later on this morning, and we'll look at that Brian Pope.
Did Joey Durrell do his community services when he was mayor?
I don't know anything about Joey Durrell being sentenced to community service.
Oh, yeah, he was.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I must not have lived here at that time.
I'm sure he did, but I mean, I know people for a fact who did not do theirs.
Okay. Thanks, guys, as always. We appreciate your time. Wingin' Wednesday, brought to you by Service Cadillac.
Thank you.
Each and every week. Have a great New Year.
One last thing.
Yeah.
Zach Barker's moving away. If you don't know who Zach Barker is.
Who is this?
He worked at Lita. Great guy. I just want to tell him on the air, we're going to miss you, buddy, and you are absolutely terrible at fantasy football.
All right.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Congratulations. 7:56 now at News Talk 96.5 KPEL.